He was one of the fiercest forces in the trenches, a man who helped build the very identity of the Raiders. Yet today, his name barely echoes through NFL history. Art Shell wasn't just a player. He was a cornerstone, a quiet warrior who protected legends, helped win championships, and carved a path where few dared to walk. His presence demanded respect. His performance spoke volumes. But time has a strange way of choosing who it remembers. How does a trailblazer disappear? The league once stood in awe of him. Teammates looked to him for strength. Fans cheered his name under the bright lights of victory. And yet now, as new generations rise, his story fades further into the shadows. Was it just time? Or was something or someone responsible for dimming his legacy? Before you answer that, let us show you the part of NFL history they don't talk about. The part where legends are forgotten, but never gone. Forged in fire, the relentless rise of Art Shell from the shadows of Charleston. Long before Art Shell stood tall on the grand stage of the NFL, he was a quiet giant growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, a place where opportunity was scarce and hardship came early. Born into a segregated world in 1946, Shell was no stranger to struggle. He didn't grow up with cameras flashing or scouts knocking. Instead, he grew up with calloused hands, relentless discipline, and a dream so big it didn't fit within the limits society tried to place on him. He found refuge in football, not as a hobby, but as a calling. At Bonds Wilson High School, Shell's imposing frame and disciplined mindset caught attention, but not enough to vault him into the spotlight. That came at Maryland State College, now University of Maryland Eastern Shore, a small HBCU often overlooked by the national stage. While other talents were fast-tracked into NFL stardom, Shell grinded in silence, dominating his opponents, studying the game, and preparing for a world that had no idea what was coming. He wasn't just fighting for a spot in football. He was fighting for respect, for every overlooked kid from a small school who was told they'd never make it. And in 1968, when the Oakland Raiders drafted him in the third round, the league unknowingly welcomed in a game-changer, the foundation of a dynasty. When Art Shell arrived in Oakland, he didn't walk in with fanfare. He walked in with purpose. Towering at 6 feet 5 inches and weighing over 270 pounds, Shell wasn't just a physical specimen. He was a technician, a perfectionist in the trenches, a silent enforcer. From the moment he stepped onto the field, his presence shifted the Raiders' offensive line. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His blocks did the talking. Quarterbacks had more time, running backs had more room, and defenses had nightmares trying to get past him. As the Raiders built their feared identity, Art Shell was laying the bricks. His partnership with fellow lineman Gene Upshaw formed one of the most dominant duos in NFL history. Together, they were the unsung architects of Raider greatness, shielding quarterbacks like Ken Stabler and opening lanes for stars like Marcus Allen. Shell would go on to play 15 seasons with the Raiders, earn 8 Pro Bowl selections, and become a 2-time Super Bowl champion. But even in glory, he remained grounded, humble, focused, never chasing the spotlight, just the next play. He was more than a player. He was a pillar, not just of the Raiders, but of the NFL itself. But what happens when history forgets to honor the pillars it was built on? The silent commander, Art Shell and the rise of a Raider empire, a fortress in silver and black. Art Shell didn't roar. He didn't celebrate with theatrics or demand attention after a big play. But when he stepped onto the field, the Raiders knew they were protected. He was their anchor, the quiet storm whose dominance was felt with every snap. While others sought fame, Shell focused on the fight in the trenches, where games were truly won. Throughout the 1970s, the Raiders built a reputation as one of the most feared teams in football. They were bold, rebellious, and unrelenting, a team of misfits turned warriors. At the heart of this machine stood Shell, the ironclad left tackle who made sure the enemy never got close to the quarterback. Week after week, Art lined up and silenced the league's fiercest defenders. He was graceful yet brutal, calculated yet aggressive. It was Shell who gave Ken Stabler the time to make magic happen. It was Shell who led the offensive line like a general without ever needing to shout. By the time the Raiders stormed into Super Bowl XI, Art Shell had already etched his legacy into the bones of the franchise. But that game was the coronation. He dominated the trenches, cleared paths for Clarence Davis and Mark Van Egan, and gave Stabler a fortress to throw from. The Raiders crushed the Vikings 32-14, and Art Shell was as responsible for that victory as anyone on the scoreboard. A champion among legends. With 8 Pro Bowl selections, 2 Super Bowl rings, and countless Sundays where he made elite defenders disappear, Shell was more than just reliable. He was elite. He didn't chase stats or glory. He built his name on consistency, toughness, and complete dedication to the Raiders' identity. Ask any teammate from that era, and they'll tell you, Art Shell was the foundation. While others played with fire, he played with steel. While the Raiders reveled in chaos, Shell brought order. And in the locker room, his words were few, but they carried the weight of 1,000 speeches. What made Shell even more iconic was the respect he commanded without asking for it. John Madden once said that Shell was the kind of player who made a coach's job easier. "You knew the left side was locked down," he said. "That's what Shell gave you: security, leadership, and unmatched pride." In a team full of legends, from Stabler to Biletnikoff, from Atkinson to Tatum, it was Art Shell who became the steady heartbeat of it all. A man who wore silver and black not just on Sundays, but in his soul. He built the wall, he protected the dream, and in doing so, he helped create a dynasty. Beyond the shield, when the cheers faded, behind the glory, the unseen struggles. Art Shell had lived in the heart of the storm, the roars of the Coliseum crowd, the deafening energy of playoff games, the adrenaline of Sunday war. But after the final whistle blew on his playing career, a different silence crept in, one that no helmet could protect him from. When Shell retired from the field, he didn't walk away in defeat. He walked away as a champion. Yet for many legends, stepping off the turf is the beginning of a battle few ever see. For Art, the adjustment wasn't easy. He had spent decades as the unshakable anchor of the Raiders line, but suddenly his days were filled with quiet moments. No game plans, no huddles, no one looking to him for a block or a blitz call. Behind the calm mask he always wore, Shell was grappling with something deeper, a growing disconnect between the warrior he had been and the man he was becoming. Injuries had taken their toll, so had time. The spotlight that once found him on every snap now moved on, chasing the next big thing. And for a man who never sought attention, being forgotten cut deeper than any sack, fading into the background. Shell's next chapter came on the sidelines, and in 1989, history was made when he became the first black head coach in the modern NFL era. It was a powerful, symbolic moment, but it didn't come without pressure. Expectations were sky high, and in many ways, Art Shell was once again left to carry something heavier than just a game plan. He carried history. His first stint as head coach was solid, even impressive. He led the Raiders to the playoffs and earned Coach of the Year honors. But that success, like so much in Shell's life, was quietly brushed aside. When the team struggled, critics were quick to turn. When the Raiders let him go, it was without ceremony. A second head coaching run in 2006 ended abruptly, and just like that, the man who had helped build the Raiders' empire was pushed into the background. As the years passed, Art Shell appeared less in the public eye. His contributions became a footnote to many. His legacy was slowly swallowed by time, eclipsed by louder voices and flashier eras. The man who had once held the line for legends was now barely mentioned in highlight reels. But behind that quiet exit was a truth that Raider Nation must never forget. Art Shell didn't fade because he lacked greatness. He faded because he never asked to be remembered. He simply did the work. And in today's game, that kind of humility often disappears without a trace. Chasing legacy, the coach who came back too late, a new battle, returning to lead. Art Shell had already conquered the game as a player, his name etched into the bones of the Raiders' greatest years. But in 1989, he stepped into an even more daunting arena, the role of head coach. In doing so, he didn't just accept a promotion, he became the first African-American head coach in modern NFL history. The weight of that moment wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Shell. He wasn't flashy. He didn't preach fire and brimstone. What he brought was steadiness, quiet strength, and an unwavering belief in discipline. The same traits that defined his Hall of Fame career. Under his leadership, the Raiders rediscovered grit. By 1990, he'd guided them to a 12-4 record and an appearance in the AFC Championship. For a moment, it looked like Art Shell was not just a legendary lineman, he was becoming a legendary coach. But the NFL is a fickle place. A few down seasons, a couple of roster misfires, and suddenly the same man who had steadied the ship was shown the door in 1994. No parade, no standing ovation, just silence. The weight of redemption. More than a decade passed before Art Shell returned to the sidelines. In 2006, the Raiders came calling again, but this time, it wasn't the same team, and Shell wasn't the same man. The NFL had evolved. The game was faster. The culture had shifted. And the Raiders? They were no longer the feared silver and black machine of old. They were broken, in need of repair, and desperate for identity. Shell accepted the challenge. Maybe it was about unfinished business. Maybe it was about pride. Or maybe, just maybe, it was about legacy. This second stint wasn't just a job. It was a chance to remind Raider Nation of who he was and who they used to be. But hope quickly gave way to heartbreak. The 2006 Raiders struggled from the outset, finishing with a league-worst 2-14 record. The team's dysfunction ran deep, and Shell's old-school style clashed with modern sensibilities. He was let go again, this time with even less ceremony than before. Critics labeled it a failed comeback. Analysts questioned whether he was ever cut out for coaching in the first place. And the man who had once helped build the foundation of the Raiders dynasty was now dismissed as a relic, part of a past the NFL was ready to leave behind. But those who truly understand the game know better. Art Shell's coaching legacy wasn't about wins and losses. It was about dignity, about trailblazing, about stepping into a world where no one who looked like him had ever stood, and doing it without anger, without ego, and without fear. He tried to revive the Raiders not because he needed validation, but because he still believed in the team that once gave him everything. In the end, that belief, that quiet and undying, might be the most powerful part of his story. Legacy lost. The silence around a trailblazer. Forgotten but not gone. The absence of recognition. Art Shell was once the cornerstone of a dynasty, a Hall of Famer, and a barrier breaker who helped reshape the NFL. Not just with his power on the field, but with his quiet courage on the sidelines. And yet today, his name barely echoes through the halls of football history. You won't hear it mentioned in highlight reels. His story isn't often retold to the next generation of fans. To many younger members of Raider Nation, Art Shell is little more than a name etched in an old stat sheet. But why? How did a man who helped build the foundation of the Raiders, who lifted Super Bowl trophies and shattered coaching barriers, become a footnote in the sport he helped shape? There's no single answer. Maybe it's the era he played in, long before the internet and social media could immortalize every move. Maybe it's because Shell wasn't a flashy personality. He didn't scream. He didn't seek the camera. He just showed up, did the work, and walked away with dignity. And in a world obsessed with drama and controversy, quiet greatness often gets left behind. Why Shell's legacy deserves more. What makes Shell's fading legacy so tragic is that his story checks every box we claim to value in sports. Overcoming adversity, humility in victory, and leadership through change. He was a dominant force as a player and a cultural trailblazer as a coach. Yet somehow he remains on the margins of the NFL's memory, celebrated only in passing, rarely with the reverence he's earned. Other legends of the game, many with fewer accolades, are lionized endlessly. Statues, documentaries, social media tributes, their household names. Meanwhile, Art Shell fades further from view each year. It forces us to ask, what does it take to be remembered in football? Is it only about media presence, headlines, personality? Or do we still honor the ones who bled for the game without asking for applause? The truth is, Art Shell deserves more. not just for breaking barriers, but for building something that still stands today, the Raider identity. He is woven into the very fabric of the franchise's legacy, even if that thread has started to fray in public memory. We need to change that, because the silence surrounding men like Shell isn't just an oversight, it's a disservice to the game itself. If we forget the ones who built it, then we lose the very foundation we stand on. Let's not let that happen, not to Art Shell. Honoring a forgotten legacy, the true measure of a legend. Art Shell's story is more than just football. It's about resilience, dignity, silent strength. He didn't chase the spotlight, yet he helped shape the very soul of the Raiders. From bulldozing defenders on the field to making history on the sidelines, Shell broke barriers without breaking character. But his legacy isn't just statistics and milestones. It's the quiet courage to lead when no one believed in him. It's the battles fought behind closed doors, the pride worn without fanfare, and the loyalty to a franchise that sometimes forgot its own hero. Art Shell may not trend on social media or headline Hall of Fame debates, but his impact still echoes if you're willing to listen. Your voice can make a difference. Now it's your turn, Raider Nation. If this story moved you, if you believe that legends like Art Shell deserve more than silence, say something, drop a comment below, share a memory, tell someone about the man who helped build the foundation we all stand on. Because history forgets when we stay quiet. But together, we can make sure that Art Shell is remembered not just as a player or a coach, but as a pillar of greatness, one who was never truly gone, just waiting to be rediscovered. Let's bring his story back where it belongs, front and center.